The first scream pierced through Ibeala at exactly 3:47 in the morning. Mrs. Ada Okonkwo woke up clutching her arm, blood seeping through her pink nightgown with little yellow flowers on it. The one her husband said made her look like a blooming garden, though she suspected he meant overgrown bush. "Something bit me," she cried out, shaking her husband so violently that he nearly fell off the bed. "Something with teeth, like knives? Sharp knives, like the ones from that expensive set your mother gave us that I'm not allowed to use for normal cooking." Mr. Okonkwo, still half asleep and thoroughly confused, stumbled out of bed wearing his favorite wrapper that had "World's Best Husband" printed on it, a gift from his wife during better times, before she started calling him "World's Most Confused Man." "Ada, what are you talking about? Teeth like knives? Did you have that spicy goat meat again before bed? You know what pepper does to your dreams." "This is not a dream, you foolish man. Look at my arm." When they checked the doors and windows, everything was locked tight. The burglar-proof bars that Mr. Okonkwo had installed himself, taking 3 attempts and 1 minor injury, were all intact. Nothing could have gotten in, not unless it could walk through walls or squeeze through keyholes like that cartoon mouse his children used to watch. But there was a wound, real, bleeding, and beginning to turn an angry shade of purple around the edges. By sunrise, Mrs. Ada had a fever that wouldn't break, even after her husband administered 2 Panadol tablets, 1 cup of warm ginger tea, and a prayer he'd learned from a TikTok pastor. This was the 3rd attack in 2 weeks. The other victims, Mr. Emeka, the tailor who once accidentally sewed a woman's dress to his own trouser, and young Chidinma, the girl who sold pure water at the motor park, were still recovering. They lay in their homes with strange fevers, speaking in tongues that were definitely not the Holy Ghost kind. In the golden morning light, the church bells rang across Ibeala. The sound was beautiful and comforting, like it had been every morning for the past 15 years. The only problem was that the bells rang at 5:30 a.m. sharp, which meant everyone in the 2-kilometer radius had abandoned all hope of sleeping past dawn years ago. And ringing those bells was Daddy John, a tall, gentle man with silver hair that looked like it had been personally styled by angels, and a smile that made children feel safe and old women forget about their arthritis long enough to run after with offers of free food. "Good morning, my children," he called out warmly as people gathered for morning prayers. His white cassock was spotless, as always, despite the dusty roads of Ibeala. Some people whispered that he must wash it every night with holy water and the tears of righteous virgins. Others thought he probably just used Omo detergent like everyone else, but liked to maintain the mystery. His Bible was worn from use, as it should be. The pages were dog-eared, the cover was cracked, and there were so many underlined passages, it looked like a yellow highlighter had exploded inside it. "Daddy John, please pray for my mother," young Emeka said, tugging at his sleeve with the kind of determination usually reserved for children asking for ice cream money. "She was bitten by something last night. Her arm is swollen like a balloon, like the ones they sell at children's parties, but not the fun kind." Daddy John's face filled with concern that looked so genuine. Hollywood casting directors would have hired him on the spot. He placed his hand on the boy's head in that way that made it seem like divine power was flowing from his palm directly into the child's skull. "Oh, my dear child, these are evil times we live in. Very evil. Almost as evil as the person who invented mathematics homework." A few chuckles rippled through the gathering crowd. "But do not fear, God will protect us." He knelt down to the boy's level, looking into his eyes with an intensity that was either deeply spiritual or slightly unsettling, depending on who you asked. "I will pray for your mother every hour today. You have my word. I will set an alarm on my phone and everything." Emeka smiled, feeling better already. "Thank you, Daddy John. You're the best man in all of Ibeala. Better than my Uncle Chitty, and he gave me 500 naira last Christmas." The elderly women nearby nodded in agreement, their wrappers swishing with collective approval. "That's the truth," said Mama Ngozi, who had been attending this church since before electricity came to Ibeala. "What would we do without him? Remember before he came? We had that reverend who kept falling asleep during his own sermons, and the one before that who ran away with the choir director." added Mama Blessing, who never missed an opportunity to remind people of past scandals. He's a saint, declared another. A living saint. If the Pope met him, he'd probably ask for an autograph. Daddy John smiled humbly and bowed his head, making a gesture that suggested he was both honored and embarrassed, like someone who just won an award they totally expected but had to pretend they didn't. Please, please. I am just a servant of God. Nothing more. Just a simple man trying to do his work, like a holy janitor, sweeping away sins instead of dirt. But his eyes, just for a moment, flashed with something cold, something hungry, something that looked less like divine love and more like someone eyeing the last piece of jollof rice at a party. Then it was gone, replaced by that warm, grandfatherly twinkle that made everyone forget they'd seen anything unusual at all. The attacks continued with the regularity of a Lagos Danfo driver ignoring traffic lights. Every few nights, someone in Ibeala would wake up screaming. Strange bite marks appeared on their arms, legs, or necks. The wounds turned black around the edges and burned like fire, specifically like the kind of fire that happens when you accidentally touch a hot pot handle without a cloth, and then spend the next 5 minutes doing an elaborate pain dance. Fevers followed. Some people got better after a week. Others stayed sick for months, lying in their beds and contemplating all their life choices, while their relatives force-fed them various herbal concoctions that tasted like punishment. And the strange thing? Every door stayed locked. Every window remained shut. It was as if the attacker could walk through walls like smoke, or like that uncle who somehow always shows up at dinner time despite nobody telling him you were cooking. It must be a ghost, whispered the market women as they sold tomatoes and gossip in equal measure. Or a curse, said the fishermen by the shore, nodding sagely while mending their nets and sharing a bottle of local gin they thought nobody knew about. Maybe it's a vampire, suggested Bright, the young man who watched too many American movies on his cracked phone screen. Like in Twilight. Bright, shut up, replied his friend Osas. This is Nigeria. We don't have vampires. We have witches, juju, and politicians. Pick one. Could be a witch then. Everything is a witch to you. Last month you said your jam failure was because of witches. We all know you didn't study. The theories grew more creative by the day. Brother Festus was convinced it was a government conspiracy. Sister Mary thought it was punishment for the youth always playing worldly music. Uncle Tun believed it was because someone in the village had angered the river goddess by peeing in the water, an accusation he would not elaborate on for obvious reasons. We need protection, declared Chief Okafor, the town's leader, standing up during a community meeting with the kind of authority that comes from wearing the biggest hat. We must pray harder. We must fast. We must... Someone turn off that generator. I can't hear myself think. And who led those prayers? Daddy John, of course. He stood before the congregation every evening, his voice rising and falling like ocean waves, or like a very dramatic reading of a telephone directory. Oh Lord, protect your children from the evil that walks in darkness, the evil that apparently has very good lockpicking skills. Cast out the demon that hunts us, the demon with the excellent timing and terrible manners. Let your holy light shine on Ibeala like a giant spiritual flashlight. The people responded with enthusiasm. Amen. 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 Even Father Michael and Father Paul, the two priests at St. Peter's Church who technically outrank Daddy John in the official church hierarchy, seemed to follow his every word. They nodded along with everything he said like those bobblehead dolls people put in their cars. They never questioned him. They acted as if he spoke with God's own voice, possibly with better Wi-Fi connection. Father Michael, a round man who enjoyed his mother's cooking a bit too much, would say things like, yes, yes, exactly what Daddy John said, before Daddy John had even finished the sentence. Father Paul, younger and more nervous, simply stared at Daddy John with the kind of devotion usually reserved for people watching the final episode of their favorite series. It was all very strange, but nobody seemed to notice. Nobody except one man. Papa Tun. Papa Tun was 62 years old and had lived in Ibeala his entire life. He was a fisherman with strong arms earned from decades of pulling nets, and an even stronger mind that refused to accept because I said so as an adequate explanation for anything. He had known Daddy John for over 20 years, back when John was just a regular church member who sang off-key and sometimes fell asleep during long sermons like a normal person, before he became this untouchable holy figure who seemed to glow with righteousness, or possibly just really good skincare. Something had changed in his old friend. Something dark. Something that made Papa Tun's fisherman instincts. Would it save him from bad weather and bad business deals in equal measure? Start ringing alarm bells. One evening, Papa Tun sat with his daughter, Ibeala, in their small house by the water. She was preparing dinner while he mended his fishing nets with the kind of focused attention that came from years of practice and stubbornness. Ibeala was 28, unmarried, a factor Annie's reminded her of at every gathering, and sharp as the knives she used to cut vegetables. She worked as a teacher at the community school and had inherited her father's tendency to ask uncomfortable questions, which did not help her popularity at family parties. "Papa, you've been quiet all day," Ibeala said, glancing at her with concern while cutting onions. She wasn't crying from the onions. Papa Tun had taught her a trick involving a wet cloth and mouth breathing, but her eyes were definitely watering from worry. "What's bothering you? And don't say nothing. I know you're a nothing face, and this is not it." Papa Tun didn't answer right away. He pulled the net tight, testing its strength, examining each knot with the precision of a man who understood that one weak point could mean disaster. Finally, he spoke. "Do you remember when Madame Beezy died?" Ibeala paused, knife in hand, an onion half chopped on her board. "Yes, that was 6 months ago." 5 months. Papa Tun corrected with the exactness of someone who had been counting. "She died 5 months ago, exactly 3 days after she stood up to Daddy John in a church meeting." "Papa, what are you saying?" Ibeala set down her knife carefully, the way you do when a conversation is about to become serious. "I'm saying she questioned him about the church's money. She said the numbers didn't add up. She was loud about it too, right in front of everyone. You know how Madame Beezy was. That woman could argue with a stone and somehow convince it to apologize." Despite the seriousness, both of them smiled slightly at the memory. Madame Beezy had been a force of nature, a retired accountant who applied her professional skepticism to everything from church finances to market prices to claims of miracle soap advertisements. Papa Tun continued, his expression darkening. 3 days later, she collapsed during morning prayers, dead before sunset. Just like that, a healthy woman who could carry 2 buckets of water on her head at 70 years old. But the doctor said it was her heart. Yes, that's what everyone said. Papa Tun's jaw tightened in that way that meant he was holding back strong opinions. But I saw Daddy John's face when she challenged him. I saw something in his eyes, something that wasn't human, something that looked like... He struggled to find the words, like a cat watching a mouse. Hungry, patient, cruel. "Papa." Ibeala dropped her voice to a whisper, glancing toward the door and window, as if someone might be listening through the walls. "In Ibeala, you never knew who might be passing by, and gossip traveled faster than 5G internet. You can't say things like that. People love Daddy John. They'll think you've gone mad. They'll say the sun damaged your brain during fishing." "Maybe I have gone mad," Papa Tun muttered, returning to his net. "Maybe the sun finally cooked my sense. But I don't think so. Not for a second." Ibeala wanted to dismiss her father's concerns. She really did. It would be so much easier to believe he was just getting old, seeing patterns where there were none, becoming one of those suspicious elders who blamed everything unusual on witchcraft or conspiracy. But her father had never been that kind of man. When other people saw signs and wonders, he saw simple explanations. When others cried miracle, he looked for logic. He was the one who figured out that the prophetic voice in the old church building was actually wind whistling through a crack in the roof. He was the one who discovered that the disappearing food from the church kitchen was being stolen by the Reverend's teenage son, not consumed by angels. If Papa Tun thought something was wrong with Daddy John, something was probably wrong with Daddy John. But proving it? That was another matter entirely. The next Sunday, Papa Tun did something risky. During a church meeting, When people were discussing various church matters with the enthusiasm of people who had nowhere better to be on a Sunday afternoon, he stood up and spoke clearly. "I have a question about the offering money from last month." The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop, assuming pins made sounds when they dropped, which they didn't. But the point was that it got very quiet very fast. Everyone turned to look at him. Some faces showed curiosity. Others showed shock. A few showed the kind of scandalous excitement people get when they sense drama approaching like a thunderstorm. Mama Ngozi gasped quietly. Brother Festus's eyes widened. Young Emeka stopped picking his nose. He thought nobody noticed, but everybody noticed. Daddy John's smile didn't waver, not even a little bit. It stayed perfectly in place like it had been painted on his face by a very skilled artist who specialized in benevolent expressions. "Of course, Papa Tund. Ask anything you like. We are all family here. Transparency is godly. Ask away, my brother." The records show we collected 50,000 naira. But the new roofing materials only cost 30,000. Where did the other 20,000 go? The whisper started immediately, rippling to the crowd like a stone thrown into a pond. Except the stone was accusation, and the pond was a church full of people who love both Jesus and juicy gossip. Father Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat, looking like a man who desperately needed to use the bathroom but couldn't leave during an important moment. Father Paul stared at the floor as if the tiles contained the secrets of the universe, or at least an excuse to avoid eye contact. Daddy John clasped his hands together, still smiling, looking like the picture of patience and understanding. "Ah, my dear brother, you have a good eye, a very good eye, sharp like an eagle. We need more people like you, paying attention to the details." This was a compliment, but somehow it didn't feel like one. That money was used for emergency repairs. Small things here and there. You understand. The toilet door handle. Some cement for cracks. Nails. Things like that. What small things specifically? Papa Tund pressed, refusing to back down despite feeling the entire room's mood shift against him like a tide turning. "Can we see the receipts?" The smile finally faded, just a little, just the tiniest bit. Like someone had turned down the brightness on a phone screen by exactly one notch. "Are you accusing me of something, Papa Tund?" "I'm just asking questions." Asking questions is not a crime. Even Jesus asked questions. Questions that sound like accusations. Daddy John's voice grew softer, which somehow made it scarier, like how horror movie music gets quieter right before something terrible happens. "Be careful, old friend. The devil uses doubt to divide God's people. Satan loves it when we fight among ourselves. He's probably watching us right now, eating popcorn, enjoying the show." A few nervous laughs, but mostly silence. "I don't want to divide anyone," Papa Tund said steadily. "I just want to understand where 20,000 naira went. That's a lot of toilet door handles." Chief Okafor, sensing the tension growing thicker than fufu, stood up to mediate. "Perhaps we can review the records together, peacefully, later this week." "There's nothing to review," Daddy John interrupted smoothly, his smile returning to full brightness. "But if Papa Tund insists, of course, we can go through every single nail and screw purchased. We can count them together. We can measure the cement. We can—" "That won't be necessary," Papa Tund said quietly, realizing he'd lost his battle before it had really begun. He sat down, feeling the entire room turn against him. People who had known him for decades now looked at him like he'd spoken blasphemy, like he'd walked into church wearing a Satan is misunderstood t-shirt, like he'd suggested replacing holy water with Coca-Cola. Mama Blessing asked loudly. Brother Festus shook his head in disapproval. Even young Emeka looked disappointed, as if Papa Tund had personally betrayed him. Only Adana, sitting beside him, gently squeezed his hand under the bench. A small gesture, but it meant everything. After the meeting, as people filed out, Papa Tund overheard whispers. Imagine accusing Daddy John, the man who prays for us every day. Papa Tund must be getting senile. My grandmother got like that too. Started seeing things, saying things. That night, Papa Tund couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of Ibeala at night. Distant generator hums, barking dogs, the occasional drunk person singing off-key, and something else. Something that felt like eyes watching his house from the darkness outside. Something that felt like danger circling closer, testing his defenses, waiting for the right moment to strike. Papa Tun woke up 3 days later feeling like his body had been replaced with concrete during the night. Papa, wake up. Adana shook him frantically, her voice climbing several octaves into pure panic territory. What's wrong? Why can't you move? Papa, answer me. Don't do this. I'm not ready to be an orphan. His arms and legs were swollen to twice their normal size, looking like they'd been inflated with a bicycle pump. His skin burned with fever, but he shivered like he was buried in ice, which was a particularly unpleasant combination of sensations that he wouldn't wish on his worst enemy, except maybe on whoever invented robocalls. When he tried to speak, only groans came out. Not even eloquent groans, just sad, confused noises that sounded like a broken accordion. Get help? He managed to whisper, each word feeling like it cost him a year of his life. Adana didn't need to be told twice. She ran to the church, her wrapper threatening to fall off several times, her slippers slapping against the dusty road, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break her ribs. She found Daddy John sweeping the altar, humming a hymn that would have been beautiful if you didn't know what she was starting to suspect about him. The morning light streamed to the windows, making him look positively angelic, which was either very good lighting or very cruel irony. Please, she cried, bursting to the door with all the subtlety of a hurricane. It's my father. He's sick, very sick. He can't move. He can barely breathe. Please come and pray for him. Daddy John set down his broom slowly, deliberately, taking his time in a way that suggested he was thinking very carefully about something. He tilted his head, like a dog hearing a strange sound. Your father? Papa Tun, yes. The way he said it made Adana's blood run cold despite the heat. His smile returned, gentle as ever. Of course, my child. I will come. Right away. Let me just finish this one small. Now. Adana surprised herself with the force of her voice. Please. Now. Of course, of course. He put the broom aside and followed her, walking with measured steps, not hurrying, acting like a man going to perform a routine duty, rather than an emergency prayer. When he arrived at Papa Tun's house and saw the old fisherman lying in bed, looking like death had sent a very aggressive invitation, Daddy John didn't kneel to pray immediately. He just stood there, staring, looking at Papa Tun, the way someone might look at a problem they'd successfully solved. This is a powerful sickness, Daddy John said quietly, almost himself. Can you heal him? Adana begged, hating how desperate she sounded but unable to care. Can you pray it away? Cast it out? Whatever needs to be done. I will pray, he said. But something in his voice sounded pleased, satisfied, like someone who just won a bet. But my child, you must understand, sometimes God calls his children home. We must accept his will. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Adana felt cold all over despite the stuffy heat of the small room. My father is strong. He'll survive. He survived worse. He once fell off his boat and swam 3 hours back to shore with a sprained ankle. Daddy John looked at her with empty eyes that reminded her of the dead fish at the market. Still there, but nothing alive behind them. We shall see. He knelt beside the bed and began to pray, but Adana noticed something odd. His words were correct, all the right phrases about healing and mercy and God's love, but there was no feeling in them. It was like listening to someone read a shopping list while pretending it was poetry. After he left, taking his time, stopping to greet neighbors on his way out like he hadn't just visited a dying man, Papa Tun grabbed his daughter's hand weakly. Don't trust him. What do you mean, Papa? Save your strength. He did this to me. Papa Tun's breath came in gasps that hurt Adana to hear. Just like Madame Beezy questioned him 3 days later, sick. The pattern clicked into place in Adana's mind like the world's worst puzzle completing itself. But how? Why? She looked at her father's swollen body. The black marks on his skin that looked suspiciously like they might have been... Papa, are these bite marks? Papa Tun managed the smallest nod. Adana's heart raced. If her father was right, then the town's most trusted man, the person everyone looked to for guidance and protection, was also its greatest danger. But who would believe her? A young, unmarried woman, accusing the saintly Daddy John of being some kind of... what? Monster? Witch? Demon? She'd be laughed out of town. Or worse, she'd be the next victim. Desperate, and having run out of conventional options being doctors who had no idea what was wrong, prayer warriors who were suspiciously unavailable, and neighbors who were mostly just bringing sympathy jollof rice, Adana went to the one place she'd been taught to avoid since childhood, the edge of the cursed mangrove forest where Baba Ogun lived. Baba Ogun was a traditional healer, old, mysterious, and rarely seen in town. Some called him a medicine man. Others whispered that he dealt with spirits and knew things that good Christians shouldn't know. The church said to stay away from him, comparing visits to his place to basically signing a contract with Satan himself. But Adana had no choice. Her father was dying, and something told her that whatever was wrong with Papa Tund had nothing to do with regular sickness, and everything to do with the kind of problems that required irregular solutions. She found his hut hidden among twisted trees that looked like they'd been designed by someone who failed geometry but had a great imagination. Smoke curled from various herbs, hanging from the ceiling and brewing in clay pots. The air smelled like earth and secrets. Baba Ogun sat outside, grinding something in a mortar with the steady rhythm of someone who'd been doing this for 1,000 years, as if he'd been expecting her. "You're Papa Tun's daughter," he said without looking up. How did you know?" Adana felt her skin prickle with that specific feeling you get when something inexplicable happens. "The wind carries more than seeds, child." He finally looked at her with cloudy eyes that seemed to see everything, past, present, future, and probably your browser history. "Your father is dying because he saw the truth, and the truth is dangerous when wrapped in lies. Please." Adana felt her knees, not caring about the dirt on her dress or her pride, or anything except saving her father. "Save him. I'll give you anything. Money, food, labor, my phone." "I don't want a phone, child. The reception here is terrible anyway." The hint of humor in his voice startled her. "But this will cost you something else. Your silence." "My silence. After this is over, people will ask how you knew, how you discovered the truth. You must never mention my name or this place. Agreed?" "Agreed." Adana would have agreed to almost anything at that point. Baba Ogun studied her for a long moment, then sighed the sigh of someone who's seen this story play out before. "What haunts your town is not a demon or a ghost. It's a man. But at night, he sheds his skin and becomes something else. A beast that feeds on blood and fear. We call it a Boltunjan, a shapeshifter. A word dog. If you want the English translation, yes. A word dog. Like werewolf, but with less Hollywood charm and more localized nightmare fuel." Adana's blood ran cold. "Daddy John, you already know the answer. Your heart knew it before your mind accepted it." Baba Ogun stood up with the creaky movements of the very old and went into his hut, returning with a small cloth bag that looked ancient and smelled like the earth after rain mixed with things that had no business being mixed. Inside here is ground yam root blessed by 7 generations, ashes from a lightning-struck tree, and bitter cola that's been prayed over by someone who actually means their prayers. Sprinkle the ashes in a circle around your father's bed tonight. Make him chew the bitter cola. Yes, I know it tastes like punishment. Make him do it anyway. When the beast comes to finish him, throw the yam root at it. What will that do? It will trap him between forms, neither man nor beast. Lock him in the transformation, and everyone will see what he truly is. No more masks. No more holy smiles. Just truth." Baba Ogun's expression grew stern. "But be warned, if you fail, if your circle isn't perfect, if your father spits out the cola, if you hesitate when throwing the root, he will kill you both. And then probably me, for good measure, which would really ruin my retirement plans." Adana took the bag with trembling hands. "Why are you helping us?" You don't know us. The church says you're dangerous. The church says a lot of things. Baba Ogun turned back to his grinding. But I'm tired of watching good people die, while evil wears a holy mask. I'm too old for that nonsense. Now go, and do exactly as I said. Exactly. Not approximately. Not close enough. Exactly. Thank you. Thank me by not dying. That would be the best thank you. That evening, Adana did everything Baba Ogun instructed with the precision of someone taking their final exam while being watched by the teacher who failed them last semester. She drew a circle of blessed ashes around her father's bed, measuring twice or 7 times, actually, because paranoia is very motivating when death is involved. She made him chew the bitter cola, even though he could barely swallow, and made faces like she was feeding him actual poison. Papa, please, you have to chew it completely. Tastes like regret. Papa Tun wheezed. I know, Papa. Keep chewing. Pretend it's medicine. Medicine? Tastes better. She placed a yam root under his pillow and kept a handful in her pocket, gripping it so tightly her palm started to hurt. Then she waited. She sat in a wooden chair beside her father's bed, every muscle tense, ears straining for sounds, heart performing gymnastic routines inside her chest. Papa Tun drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling prayers and warnings, and at one point asking for fried plantain, which made Adana want to cry and laugh at the same time, because leave it to Papa to be dying and still thinking about snacks. Midnight came. Nothing. Then 1 o'clock. Still nothing. Adana wondered if maybe she'd gotten it wrong, if maybe Baba Ogun was just a crazy old man who'd sent her on a wild goose chase, if maybe 2 o'clock passed. At 2:47 a.m. exactly, she would remember the time forever, the way you remember significant moments like your first heartbreak or the time you accidentally sent a text to the wrong person. She heard it, scratching at the door, slow, deliberate, like claws dragging across wood, not the scratching of a confused animal or a branch in the wind. This was purposeful, intelligent, patient. Adana's breath caught in her throat. Every horror movie she'd ever mocked suddenly felt very real. She wanted to scream, to run, to wake up and discover this was all just a nightmare brought on by expired stew. The scratching stopped. Silence. Then crash. The window exploded inward in a shower of glass and wood. Adana screamed and threw herself over her father protectively, because that's what you do even when terror is literally jumping through your window. Something black and massive leaped into the room with the grace of a predator and the smell of something that had been dead and buried, and then dug itself up for a revenge tour. It had the basic shape of a huge dog, if that dog had been designed by nightmares and rage. Its eyes burned red like hot coals fresh from Hell's barbecue. Its fangs were long and sharp, dripping with saliva that sizzled when it hit the floor. The smell of rot and death filled the air so completely that Adana gagged. But underneath all the horror, there was something familiar, something in the way it moved, something in the intelligence behind those burning eyes. The beast's red gaze locked onto Papa Tun lying helpless in bed. It moved forward with purpose, saliva dripping, claws scraping against the floor, then stopped. The ashes. The beast paced around the circle, snarling and snapping, unable to cross the line. It tried once, putting one massive paw over the threshold, then jerked back with a yelp like it had touched something electric. Frustrated, it threw back its head and let out a howl that made Adana's bones ache, her teeth hurt, and her soul seriously consider leaving her body early. Then it turned toward her. Oh no! Oh no! Now! Papa Tun gasped from the bed, his voice stronger than it had been in days, fueled by pure urgency and paternal terror. Adana fumbled in her pocket for the yam root, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it, which would have been a very embarrassing way to die. Death by butterfingers. The beast lunged toward her, and in that frozen moment, Adana saw her life flash before her eyes. Childhood by the water, learning to fish with Papa, teaching her first class, that time she accidentally called the principal Daddy, in front of everyone, she threw the yam root with all her strength, putting into it every ounce of fear, anger, and desperate hope she possessed. It hit the beast square in the chest with sound like thunder and lightning meeting for coffee. The creature screamed, a sound that was half animal, half human, and completely terrible. It was the sound of something being torn apart from the inside, of reality bending in ways it was never meant to bend. Its body began to twist and change. Fur receded like water draining from a sink. Limbs stretched and reformed with sounds that Ibeala would hear in her nightmares for years. The red eyes flickered between burning coal and human brown. The snout shortened, lengthened, shortened again, unable to decide what it wanted to be. And there, caught between two forms like someone stuck in a really terrible transition phase, was Daddy John. Half man, half monster, frozen in agony. His face twisted into an expression that showed both human consciousness and animal rage. His white cassock hung in tatters on his transforming body. His silver hair was matted with sweat and something darker. Whatever was, made a sound somewhere between a growl and a sob. "Get rope?" Papa Tund whispered from the bed, his voice shaking but determined. Ibeala stood frozen for a moment, her brain trying to process what she was seeing. This was Daddy John, the man who blessed babies, who led prayers, who smiled at everyone like they were his favorite person. And he was a monster. Literally. "Ibeala!" Papa Tund's voice snapped her back to reality. "The rope? While he's weak." She grabbed fishing rope from the corner, the strong kind Papa used for big catches, the kind that had held fighting fish and stubborn nets. With shaking hands and a prayer to every deity she could think of, being thorough seemed appropriate given the circumstances, she approached the half-transformed creature. It fought weakly, making pathetic sounds that were somehow more disturbing than the earlier howl. Up close, she could see how the magic held it trapped, not fully human, not fully beast, caught in a painful limbo. "I'm sorry," she whispered as she tied the rope, though she wasn't sure what she was apologizing for. Maybe for what she was about to do to someone who'd been a pillar of the community. Maybe for being human and having to deal with this nonsense. Maybe just because saying, "I'm sorry" felt like the right thing when tying up a word dog who used to babysit you. By dawn, they had dragged the half-transformed creature into a wooden cage Papa Tund used for catching large fish. It took all their strength. Papa Tund somehow finding energy from pure stubbornness and possibly adrenaline, and several breaks to catch their breath while trying not to think too hard about what they were doing. When the sun rose, painting Ibeala in shades of gold and pink that seemed inappropriately beautiful given the circumstances, the transformation completed. Sitting in the cage, naked and trembling and looking very much like someone who'd had the worst night of his life, was Daddy John, fully human, but unable to hide anymore. The silver hair was still there. The face that had smiled so gently was still the same face. But his eyes had lost that grandfatherly twinkle, replaced with pure hatred and the look of someone whose very long con had just been spectacularly ruined. "Well," Papa Tund said, leaning against a cage and breathing heavily, his fever already starting to break now that the curse was weakening. "This is awkward." Ibeala, despite everything, despite the terror and trauma and the fact that her hands were still shaking, let out a laugh that was probably 90% hysteria. "Awkward? Papa, we just caught a word dog in a fish cage." "True. Not sure what the fishing regulation says about this. Probably need a special license." Even Daddy John, still trapped between hate and helplessness, looked at them like they were insane. Maybe they were, but they were alive, and that was something. By mid-morning, the entire town had gathered in the village square. Word had spread faster than hot gossip at a wedding. Papa Tund caught something. "You won't believe what's in his fish cage. Come see. Bring the children. Actually, maybe don't bring the children." Chief Okafor stood with his council, his elaborate hat slightly crooked, suggesting he'd been woken up urgently and hadn't had time for his full morning preparation routine. Father Michael and Father Paul were there, looking confused and afraid, like students who just realized they'd been studying the wrong material all semester. Market women, fishermen, children, despite recommendations otherwise, elderly people who never came out for anything, young people with their phones ready to record, because if it's not on social media, did it even happen? Everyone came to see the man they trusted locked in a cage designed for tilapia. "This is madness," shouted Uncle Chitty from the crowd. "That's Daddy John. He's a man of God. This is some kind of trick. Special effects. like in the movies. Let him go, cried Mama Blessing, who looked personally offended that her favorite prayer leader was in a cage. This is disrespectful. Sacrilegious. Probably illegal. Is there signal here? I want to go live on Facebook, said Bright, who had priorities that were debatable at best. Bright read the room. Osas hissed at him. But Papa tunned, still weak, but standing with his daughter's help and the kind of determination that comes from being proven right after everyone thought you were crazy. Raised his hand. Pour the ashes, he said to Dana. She took the remaining blessed ashes from Baba Ogun's pouch and, with silent prayer and a whispered sorry about this, threw them over Daddy John. He screamed. And right before everyone's eyes, in front of crowd, in front of priests, in front of people recording on their phones, in front of Chief Okafor and his council, and Bright, who was definitely getting this on Facebook Live, his form flickered. Half human, half beast, just for a moment before settling back into human shape. But that moment was enough. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Some people screamed. One woman fainted, Mama Jennifer, who fainted at most dramatic events anyway, so this was on brand for her. Children cried. Bright dropped his phone, which cracked, a tragedy he would mourn for weeks. What is this? Chief Okafor stepped forward, his face pale, his hand gripping his walking stick, so tightly his knuckles turned white. What are you, Daddy John? Daddy John looked up at the crowd. For a moment, Adana thought he might continue the act, might plead innocence, might try to explain this away somehow. But then something in him snapped. Maybe it was being caught. Maybe it was a humiliation. Maybe it was seeing all those faces that had adored him now looking at him with horror. His expression changed from fear to something else. Something cold. Something that had been hiding beneath the holy mask for 15 years. You want the truth? He spat, his voice dropping the gentle tone everyone knew, revealing something harsh and bitter underneath. Fine, I'll give you the truth. Why not? It's not like I can talk my way out of a cage covered in magic ashes while people have video evidence. Social media ruins everything. The crowd went silent. I've been feeding on you for 15 years. Daddy John continued, his voice dripping with venom that made his usual honey-sweet tone seem like a distant memory. Every night, I chose someone to bite, someone to curse, someone to slowly drain. I fed on your blood, your fear, your stupid, blind, pathetic trust. Someone in the crowd sobbed. I chose carefully, he continued, warming to his confession now, like someone who'd been holding in a secret for too long. Never too many people at once. Never anyone too important. Well, except when they deserved it. Never enough to make you realize the pattern. Just enough to keep me strong, keep me fed, keep me powerful. Father Michael's voice cracked like breaking glass. But you're a church man. You serve God. You led us in prayer every single day. Daddy John laughed, a horrible, broken sound that had nothing to do with joy. I serve myself. God? Which God? The one you worship with your eyes closed and your brains turned off? The one you thank for every little thing while blaming the devil for everything else? That God. You blaspheme, someone shouted. I speak truth. Daddy John snarled back. I killed my wife when she discovered what I was. Pushed her into the river. Everyone thought she drowned accidentally. You even prayed for me at her funeral. Some of you cried with me. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, remembering that funeral. The grief they'd felt for poor Daddy John who'd lost his wife so tragically. I cursed Madame Beasy when she asked too many questions about money. 3 days later, she was dead. Heart attack, the doctor said. So convenient. His smile was cruel. And you know the best part? I bound both of these so-called priests with food I prepared. Father Michael and Father Paul stared at him in horror. Remember those special meals I made for you? The ones I said were blessed? The ones I insisted you eat during our planning meetings. Daddy John's eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction. You ate my meals, and now you can't disobey me. You're my puppets, dancing on strings you can't even see. Father Paul collapsed to his knees, weeping like a child. No, it can't be. Oh, but it is. Daddy John seemed to be enjoying himself now, like someone who'd been holding in complaints for years and finally had the chance to air them. Every time you wanted to question me, you found you couldn't. Every time you thought something was odd, the thought slipped away. Every time someone challenged me, you defended me without knowing why. You couldn't help it. You were bound. Father Michael looked like he might be sick. All this time, Daddy John confirmed. And it was so easy, so incredibly easy. Because you people don't want to think. You don't want to question. You want someone to tell you what to believe, how to pray, where to give your money. You want to follow. So I let you follow, right into my teeth. Chief Okafor's face hardened, his authority finally returning after the shock. You used our faith against us. You weaponized our trust. And it worked beautifully. Daddy John's smile returned, twisted and cruel. You gave me power. You gave me respect. You gave me access to your homes, your families, your children. You gave me everything I needed to hunt you like sheep. Stupid, trusting, delicious sheep. The word delicious made several people in the crowd look physically ill. Adana stepped forward, her voice steady despite her fear, despite the rage boiling in her chest. But you made one mistake. Oh, and what was that, little girl? The condescension in his voice was thick enough to cut. You underestimated my father. You thought he was just an old fisherman who'd stay quiet after you intimidated him at the church meeting. You thought cursing him would silence him permanently. She looked at Papa Tun with pride fierce enough to burn. But he was brave enough to speak the truth, even when everyone else was blind, even when you tried to kill him for it. Brave? Stupid, more like. But there was something in Daddy John's eyes now. Respect? Regret? Fear? Your father should have kept his mouth shut. People who ask questions in this town don't last long. No. Papa Tun said quietly, stepping forward despite his weakness. People who ask questions in this town expose monsters who wear holy masks. It just took 15 years too long. The crowd murmured, shame and realization washing over them like cold water. They had been blind. They had been foolish. They had given this monster everything he needed to terrorize them, wrapped in hymns and prayers and holy robes. What do we do with him? Someone asked. Police, suggested another. They'll never believe this, countered someone else. We have a war dog in a fish cage talking about eating people. They'll think we're all mad. Then what? Voices overlapped, rising in confusion and fear and anger. Chief Okafor raised his hand for silence. Council, we meet now. Chief Okafor called for an emergency council meeting right there in the square, because some decisions were too important for closed doors, and also because everyone was already there, and trying to get them to leave and come back would be impossible. The elders formed a circle, speaking in low tones while the crowd waited with a kind of tense anticipation, usually reserved for penalty shootouts and election results. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably 20 minutes, Chief Okafor stepped forward. This man, this creature, has betrayed us in the worst way possible, the chief declared, his voice carrying across the square with the weight of absolute certainty. He used our faith, our traditions, and our love of God to hide his evil. He weaponized our trust. He fed on our blood and our fear. He killed our people. What is the punishment for such crimes? The elders whispered among themselves again. Finally, Baba Akim, the oldest elder who was approximately 100 years old give, or take a few decades, spoke in a voice like dried leaves rustling. There's only one place for him, the cursed mangrove forest, the deep part, where the trees grow so thick that sunlight fears to enter. Let him live there, where no prayer will follow him, no human will help him, and no God, if any God would claim him, will hear him. Daddy John's face went pale for the first time. No, not there, anything but there. You showed no mercy to your victims, Papa Tun said quietly, meeting his former friend's eyes. You showed no remorse. You fed on us for 15 years, so you will receive the mercy you gave. None. The forest will kill me. Maybe, Chief Okafor said coldly. Maybe not. That's between you and whatever lives in those trees. But you will never walk in Ibeala again. You will never wear holy robes again. You will never smile at our children again. That chapter is closed. By sunset, a group of strong young men, who'd been promised extra portions at the next community feast for this unpleasant duty, took Daddy John deep into the mangrove forest, still bound, still half-trapped by the magic that kept trying to transform him. They walked for hours, deeper and deeper, until the path disappeared and the trees grew so close together they seemed to be whispering secrets to each other. "This is far enough," said Uche, the leader of the group, looking around nervously. Even grown men didn't like being this deep in the cursed forest. They untied Daddy John, because even condemned word dogs deserve to face their fate with free hands, apparently, and backed away quickly. Daddy John stood there, naked, shaking, looking suddenly small and pathetic rather than terrifying. "Please," he whispered, and for a moment, he sounded almost human again. "Please don't leave me here." "You left 15 years of mercy behind you," Uche said, though his voice wavered slightly. "We're just returning what you gave." As the villagers walked away, following the markers they'd left to find their way back, they heard him screaming curses into the trees. But no one looked back, not even once.